For so long, the world was ruled by beings like me, that is, manifestors, people who are the only type, 9% of humanity, that have the capacity to be able to act on their own. And all of that has changed in the last 220 years. Reflectors truly have a role in this life, and they have a role in the future. That role is about them being the only ones that can actually judge what is really going on, positively or negatively, in the environment. Whether that's the human environment or the civilization environment or whatever the case may be. The key begins with recognizing what that sacral in you, that open sacral, says. It says, you can't tell me what to do, you have to ask me. You can't demand that I do things, you have to ask me. And one of the first processes in really waking up to be what it is, to be a reflector, it begins with this demand for that respect. You must be shown respect, and you must be asked. Asked. At the core of all reflectors is an open G center. And the G center is framed on two things. It's framed on direction, it's framed on love. All reflectors come into the world not knowing who they are. It's only natural, and they're never going to find out, so don't worry about it. This is not the role of reflectors. Every other type, I tell them, you have to know who you are, and this is how you find out who you are. Well, you're not here to find out who you are. You're here to be totally sensitive to who is around you. This is something completely different. You have a very, very different role in this life. Because you see, how you feel at any given moment is about where you are and who's there. Your barometers for the communities that you're a part of. Your barometers. You're here to be able to walk into a room, and by how you feel, that's the composite of that room. You know, you go for a walking tour through the neighborhoods. As reflectors, you can actually define the difference between all of those neighborhoods by how you feel as you walk through them. This is the magic of what it is to be a reflector. This capacity to be able to filter a larger aura, to be able to filter a larger environment. The throat center is the center of metamorphosis. It is the heart of both our capacity to be able to articulate in language, and it's about our potential to be able to act and to be able to do. You know, it's very easy for you to overdo everything. And you really have to see that you're intended to operate differently than others, and you're certainly not intended to compete with energy types. You're not here to be doers. You're not here to be doers. You're not here to be like the rest. You're not here to be super generators, laboring away all the time. That's not what you're here for. Yes, you're here to do something. You're here to sample all of that. You're here to guide in that sense. You're here to make other people aware, because you're the ones that are here to pick up all of that energy. But what's so important for you to recognize is this is not a life in which you initiate. It's not. Let everybody else do the initiating. Because you see, the thing about you is that for years people would say to me, if you could have any kind of design, what would you have? And I said to them, I'd like to have a design that's totally open like a reflector, but there's no gates either. It's totally open. And when it's totally open, the capacity is extraordinary. That is, you get to take in the program, you get to take in everything purely. It's perfect. The open centers, they're hell. Oh yeah, all the conditioning. I'll show you some of the worst conditioning you get. But you see, the moment you get past an open center just being conditioning, it becomes what it's intended to be, a pathway to wisdom. Nobody on this planet is born with a greater potential to be wise than you. Nobody. Nobody. You're here to be wise, and you're here to be wise about the nature of the world around you. That's why there's one reflector for every 100 people. They're not here to shoulder the weight of getting everything done. Otherwise, there'd be a lot more of them. They're not. They're here to be able to be wise in the way of what is going on around them and to be of service to those other 99 by letting them know what's going on, because that's the gift. And that's the gift that you have. All reflectors have open egos. The heart center. The heart center is the center of willpower. For you, in terms of the undefined ego, is not to get trapped into being willful. This brings us to the awareness centers. We have 3. Splenic center here, the ajna center along with the head, the mental system, and over here, the emotional system. I'm going to start over here in the splenic system. The spleen is the body's immune system. It's the feel-good center. So you came into this life not feeling good. You're designed not to not feel good. You're designed to be deeply sensitive to either feel good or the lack of it. You see, the ideal of an open mind is that you're actually the ones that are here to be able to tell the difference between good concepts and bad concepts. You're not the ones that are here to initiate the concepts. You're the ones who are here that filter them. This is the intellectuality of your design, to be able to take concepts in and to be able to filter them and say, all right, this is a good one, this isn't. This is what you should be doing, in a sense, with all of your centers. You take in conditioning all the time. This conditioning is okay, this conditioning isn't. This conditioning is okay, this conditioning isn't. This is the reality for you. And when it's on the mental plane, it's the same thing. Somebody has to be able to assess what's going on. This is what being a reflector is all about. Take the example of the mind, the ajna center, our center of conceptualizing. You come into the world with an open mind. It means that you come in basically with an intellectual potential. It's open, after all. It can take in the logic, it can take in the abstract, it can deal with the unique. In other words, it's a mind that's open and it can deal with all kinds of concepts in all kinds of ways. It's not fixed. And it means that no thought that you can have is ever going to stay fixed, because it can't. Your design isn't about you. Your design is about filtering a larger field. It's the larger field that actually has to make the decisions, and then you, in your capacity, can say, that was a good decision, no, that one wasn't a good decision. Each of you have an open solar plex smile. She did too. Everybody that has an open solar plex has that smile, and that smile says, I'm a nice person, I don't want to mess with you, don't mess with me, everything will be fine as long as you don't irritate me or annoy me. And as long as you don't irritate me, annoy me, crank me up, or anything else, I'll continue to smile with you, but I don't want any confrontations and I don't want any trouble. And the moment I smell confrontation or trouble, I'm going to run away. That's the smile. The emotional system operates in a wave, and it brings us a wave of hope and pain. And that wave is something that is, it can be overwhelming to somebody who has an open solar plex system. Because what happens with all open centers is that open centers amplify. You're not here to be emotional beings. You're not here to feel good all the time. Otherwise, you lose your alertness and stop really being of value. You're not here to be workers. You're not. You're here to be critics. You're here to be guides. You're here to be judges. You're here to be censors. You're here to be those that can truly sense what's going on around you. But you really have to see how important it is for you to understand. Don't be like everybody else. You're really here to sense the identity of something larger than yourself. In essence, that can also be deeply mystical. It's not just the community around you. That can extend to the totality. That can extend to, your spiritual life, whatever it may be. My comment earlier about, an ideal design in which you're open and there's no activations. It's so that you can take in the whole program in that sense, and that you can be connected to the whole. That's your advantage in that sense over anyone who has definition. You're much, you're designed to be integrated into the whole. You're designed to see something larger than yourself. You're designed to have a sensory capacity for something that is much larger than yourself. This is part of the whole picture that's building. And it's a picture that builds over that whole frequency. You're here to be the deepest of people. I mean, you're here to be really deep. You're here to be wise. And you see, you're not like anybody else who has to process things immediately or process things in an emotional wave. You're here to process things over time because you get to focus on different aspects in different ways, and it's a consistent cycle. And of course, the most important thing for you to see is that dependency on a single person is always a risk for you. You need to have many people in your lives. It's very, very important. It's often very difficult to deal with relationships with reflectors because of the depth of generalized conditioning. We're conditioned that our primary relationship is always with one person. And that's the way that all the types are conditioned. And the whole thing about the nature of a reflector is that the most important force for a reflector is never simply one person. That presents difficulties. And it presents difficulties in partnership courses that I have done. One of the things that I tell people at the end of these partnership courses, and I tell them not to get upset and what to do, is that basically we are designed to be with our own kind. We are. You have to be very lucky to be a reflector and find a reflector. I know there are very few reflector couples in the world, and it is the only relationship at a personal level that can actually work for a reflector. And this is a dilemma for them. After all, they're a small percentage of the population. If it's one reflector in 100 people in a room, you can imagine that you need a pretty big room just to begin to see if you have any kind of selection. Now, it can be possible with a projector, because a projector is, in fact, a non-energy type. However, even with a projector, it still is ultimately going to end up with the reflector constantly either being dominated or compromised. Now, these are terms that are there in design. Dominance is when somebody has a whole channel and you don't have it, and a compromise is when you have part of a channel and somebody has the whole channel. And of course, in that compromise can lead to a lot of tension and frustration. So it's exceedingly difficult for reflectors to actually find relationships, even being correct. An energy type comes up to a reflector and says, I really want you, and I really, blah, 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 and let's live together, and da-da-da. And the reflector says, okay, give me a month, and the energy type says, all right, and the reflector goes through their process, and they get to the end of the month, and they say, yes, it's okay. They're still going to get to a point in that relationship where this is simply a lesser of evils. That's all. A lesser of evils, because they will get to a place where they are simply uncomfortable. See, they're not designed for just one person. They're not. They're not designed to be mostly sensitive to just one person. That's what everybody else is. That's not what they are. They're here to be sensitive to an environment. Most of the reflectors I know would continually have children just to make sure they have an environment. Because it's the environment that matters for them. The community, whatever it is.